All right, so let's try this out in our node environment and see how this plays out in practice. So for us, we're going to do this inside the idea of a task application. So we're building an application that's basically just a task manager. So I'm going to create a new file called task.js. And what I'm going to do is create a task object. So we're going to start by creating our task constructor. And if you remember, we create a task constructor just by creating a function. So in this case, I'm going to call it task, and we're going to create a function that we're going to put everything in. Now in this case, I'm going to pass in name. So whenever I create a new copy of our task object, I'm going to pass in the name, and I'm going to create a task with that name in it. So the first thing we'll do is this.name equals name. The other item on task that we want to keep track of, so if you think about a task application, whether or not it's completed. So in this case, the default is going to be false. All right, now I have a task object, and it has this.name and this.completed. Those are the only two things. Now what I want to do is I'm going to add a function to this. So this.completed equals a function, and this function is going to change the value of completed. So let's just say that. So this.completed equals true. Now let's create one more. Let's do a save as well. So this.save. So once I make changes to a function, I want to save it to the database or something like that. And in this case, we'll just write out saving. We'll just say saving task and then give us the name. All right, so now I have a constructor that has two properties, name and completed, and then two functions. Completed, or let's actually not call this completed. Let's call this complete. And we'll put a CL on this too so you see what's happening. We'll just say completing task and then task.name. All right, so now I have a constructor ready to go. Now to use that to create a new instance of this object, I am going to say var task1 equals new task, and we'll pass in our task name. And we'll just say that's what we're doing. Now I can create a couple different instances of this, or to use the correct terminology, really in this case, I'm just creating several copies of this object because we don't have classes in what we're doing here. So I'm creating an object and then I'm just making copies of that object. So there we go. And then we'll do constructors. We're going to do modules. We're going to do singletons, and we'll do prototypes. All right. So I have 4 copies of this object, and they all have their own individual object scopes. So I can do task1.complete, execute that, and then we can save all of them. And you can see when I run this that they all have a separate this. So when I execute task4.save, up here the save on line 11, you can see I've got this.name. And so the this refers to the object scope of whatever object is calling the save function. So in this case, task4.save refers to the object scope of task4. So the this refers to task4. So what you'll see is this.name being, in this case, create a demo for prototypes. Real quick before we show this, let's make that this. All right, now let's run this. There you go. Now what you see is there's completing task, save, save, save for each of the different things. All right, so that's the basics of the constructor. Let's talk about one other thing before we make this fleshed out a little bit more.